Good pace out here early in the second. Levert, hey, knocks it down. Rondo's on the run. Stops, gets Love. Love fires. Cavs reset with a fresh 14. Under 3 to go in the half. Garland works on Holiday. Lost it for a moment. Shovels to Mobley. Garland, step back three, drew a foul, knocks it down.
Oh, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, tonight you are listening live here to episode number 20 of the All Things Cleveland Cavaliers podcast. I am your host, Brandon Lewis. Today, I am with a special fill-in guest host, Believe Land media writer, Josh Ungar. Josh, how's it going?
I am doing well. Well, I could be better if I didn't have this little situation, but it'll get taken care of in due time.
For those of you that are listening on our audio platforms, Josh unfortunately has a broken arm, so he is doing this with one arm today. Josh, thank you for being a trooper and being here. Unfortunately, our regular co-host Joey Snyder cannot be here today, but Joey, we hope that you are back with us next week. With that being said, as always, make sure to follow us on Twitter at All Things Cavs. Josh, we have a lot to talk about today with the Cleveland Cavaliers.
We do, my friend.
Yes, we do. I am about to enter in my inner Skip Bayless. I am about to unleash on this team. Before I do, I'm going to throw it to you, Josh. Over the past week, it was a brutal week for Cavaliers basketball, losing to the Pistons, coming out of the All-Star break, barely defeating the Wizards, and then obviously dropping the last 2 games against Minnesota and Charlotte. Darius Garland did come back last night for our Cavs. It did not make that much of a difference in the ball game. Man, what has happened to this team over the last week?
So I actually want to address what you were just talking about with Darius Garland specifically, because I'm annoyed with him. And I'll tell you why. Because he's been dealing with this back injury situation for a large majority of the season, it feels like. And coming into the All-Star break, he was sitting out games because of this back injury. And then what happens? It's All-Star break here in Cleveland, and he's participating in the Taco Bell Skills Challenge. He's playing in the All-Star game itself. And then what happens? We come out of the All-Star break, and he didn't play in the game against Detroit. I'm pretty sure he did not play in the game against Washington, if I remember correctly.
He did not. Last night was his first game back since the All-Star break.
Right. Okay. So that's even more infuriating that, like, okay, you sat out or you played, in the All-Star game, and yet you're having to sit out the next 4 games, 3 games, 3 or 4. Sometimes my math gets a little bit jumbled, so forgive me on that one. But it's just so frustrating. But we can address that more later. Looking at this team as a whole, I think it's just them leveling off. Like, I think we overachieved early, and it looked like we were going to be legit contenders. But again, we're a young team. We have a lot of young pieces. I don't know if I think Rajon Rondo is the oldest player on this team. Kevin Love might be older. I don't know off the top of my head.
Rondo is the oldest player on the team.
Okay, thanks. But still, it's like with us being such a young team, young teams tend to get off to this fast start, and then the rest of the league kind of figures you out and they make adjustments. We've seen that these past 4 games. Teams are making adjustments. They're changing how they're guarding us. And this month of March is going to be brutal. I mean, think about it. We have Philadelphia next. After that, you've got Toronto. After that is Indiana. And then we have a 6-game schedule later in the month, or a 6-game homestand where you got like the Lakers, you got the Clippers. I think Philadelphia's in there.
Dallas, Denver,
Detroit. Dallas is in there. And then, so it's, even though you're playing at home, that's not going to be easy. So here's what I'm asking for from the Cavs. First of all, figure this shit out now. But more importantly than that, I don't want them to fall into that 7 to 10 range where they're in the play-in tournament. Because to me, the play-in tournament is not the playoffs. It's just hey, here's your participation trophy. Like, it's like when you get like that certificate in middle school or elementary school, it's like, congratulations, you did a great job type thing. But it's not like the playoffs. So if we can stay in the 4 to 6 range, I'm okay. Just do not fall into the play-in tournament scenario, because again, that's not good for me.
So in the middle of January, after the Cavs dismantled the defending NBA champions and the defending MVP, Giannis Antetokounmpo and the Milwaukee Bucks, me and my co-host Joey Schneider came on here the next day we recorded. We said the Cavs are legit. That was the first team that we beat all year. I know we beat Miami, but Miami didn't have their players at that time. We beat Brooklyn. They didn't have Kevin Durant at the time. We said that was the first legitimate win they had all season. This team is legit. They should be considered legitimate contenders. And I've been saying over the last 2 weeks, the honeymoon phase for this team is over, because we
agree then.
Because we saw it. We saw it against Milwaukee. I don't know what the heck has been going on with this team since a little bit before the All-Star break. Darius Garland misses a game against Indiana, comes back against Philadelphia. Then he comes back. All of a sudden, he doesn't play for a couple of games. But the one thing that I did notice with this Cavs team, with Darius Garland gone, is a couple of things. Number one, Darius Garland is our best player. I know this team is built for the bigs, obviously Evan Mobley, Lamar Stevens, Jared Allen. Darius Garland is the best player. Jared Allen is a star. He is not a superstar. And so because of that, I believe you need at least one superstar in today's NBA to win a championship. You used to need 2. The big 3 era is kind of over now. You know, we're seeing it a little bit in Brooklyn if they get healthy, but they've been kind of injured the whole year. The Lakers are an old injury big 3 that are not well constructed, so you don't really need that anymore. But the Cavs do have a superstar in Darius Garland. Jared Allen is a star. Now that third star, because I believe you need a superstar and then you need 2 stars. We have our superstar. We have our star. Who is that third star going to be? Is it going to be Evan Mobley? Is it going to be Lamar Stevens? Could it be Caris LeVert? Could it be Colin Sexton when he comes back? There's all these questions that need to be answered. But at the end of the day, me and Joey for the last couple of weeks have been saying we think that this Cavs team could have beat anybody in the league. And this last week, unfortunately, at least for me, I have changed my stance. I no longer think that this team is going to be an Eastern Conference Finals team. Do I think that they should at least win one playoff series? I think it really depends on who they match up with. Obviously, we're about to see a gauntlet, with you mentioned it, at Chicago and at Miami next week on a back-to-back. They're playing Philadelphia this weekend. Philadelphia looks much better than I thought they would early on with James Harden and Joel Embiid. So this is a rough stretch. And Coach J.B. Bickerstaff said last night, this team is up against adversity, and right now they're not responding to it. Let's see how they respond to it come up Friday.
Yeah, and here's the thing. I see what you're saying about Garland being a superstar. I'm not ready to put that title on him yet. I think he can get there, but I just think he hasn't. I don't want to say he hasn't established himself quite yet, but he's starting to show that he's a little bit injury prone, right? So,
I would disagree with that. I don't know if injury prone is a fair label for a 3-year player. I give you he's had some back soreness. Let's hope that he can figure this out as of now. But his value was shown last night, by the way, and even Saturday night against Washington and Monday night against Minnesota, because the Cavs really struggled. What teams are starting to figure out is when they don't have Darius Garland on the court, and we know obviously Rajon Rondo is also missing, so they have a undrafted player in Brandon Goodwin starting at the point guard position, who played good against Minnesota but really struggled against Washington. And so when you have a situation when Goodwin is not scoring, Okaro is a great defensive player. I don't know why we didn't put him on Kyle Kuzma earlier in the ballgame. Okaro saved that game Saturday night, but he's not the greatest offensive scorer either. So when you have that, then what teams are doing is they're basically doubling the bigs. Whoever gets the ball, whether it's Evan Mobley, whether it's Jared Allen, whether it's Markkanen, whether it's Love when he comes in the game, and they're forcing the guards to make outside shots. And so Garland really, in my opinion, up the offensive end of the floor. My concern is the Cavs before the All-Star break were number 1 in the NBA in defensive efficiency, Josh. Since then,
true.
Where's the defense been? Where was the defense last night with Kelly Oubre going crazy, hitting 5 threes in the first quarter? They couldn't stop the free-point line at all.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the defense was there against Washington because that was a close game throughout. And here's the problem, because you talked about it. We're really thin at that guard spot because Karis LeVert is out. Garland is in and out of the lineup. Rondo's out. Sexton is done for the year. Although I think that's actually a blessing in disguise, and I'll tell you why. Because before Sexton went down, what I saw was I would compare Colin Sexton to the Houston Rockets version of James Harden, where Harden would just be dribble, 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 and the rest of the guys on offense would just be standing there like, okay, I'm just going to stand here and wait for the ball to come to me. Whereas what I've seen post Sexton injury with Garland as our starting point guard, guys are moving in and out of the lineup, and it's become much more free-flowing, if you will, where I don't want to say guys don't like playing with Colin Sexton, because I'm not going to try and get in the mind of like a Jared Allen or a Kevin Love or anybody like that. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a psychiatrist, whatever the word is. I get confused between the two. Anyway, my point is, with our guard depth being so low, we're hand-tied. But you're right. Teams have made that adjustment of, okay, if we force their guards to shoot that outside shot, they can't do anything. Because, again, we're so depleted, and the guards we do have are not offensive-minded. Like, look at Okaro, for example. When I went to the game that I'm using as my virtual background against Chicago, Okaro only scored 9 points. I literally filmed the entire fourth quarter. It's on my YouTube channel. And I titled it like Isaac Okaro double-digit point watch, because it felt like at the time a rarity for Isaac Okaro to score 10 plus points. And he never got there. And I mean, we ended up winning this game easily because Chicago was without some of their key members. And I want to actually touch on that, and then I'll toss it back to you. But I hate when analysts and media members, fans, whatever, don't give us the credit we deserve for beating these teams, even when they're depleted. Like, yeah, we beat the Brooklyn Nets without Kevin Durant, but guess what? At the time, they still had Kyrie Irving. They still had James Harden. When we beat Chicago in this game, they still had Lonzo Ball. They still had Zach LaVine. They still had Nikola Vucevic. When we beat Miami, they didn't have Bam Adebayo and Jimmy Butler, but they still had Duncan Robinson, Tyler Hero, and I believe they had Kyle Lowry. I might be wrong on that, so don't quote me, but that part is extremely frustrating for me.
Well, to your point on Okaro, what I noticed with Garland out is Okaro was much more, aggressive, especially going after getting the rebounds, lying in on the defensive end. And one of the things I liked is off a defensive rebound or off a steal, when Okaro got the ball, he didn't slow down instead of a play. He was attacking right at the basket and drawing fouls. And I'll tell you another thing, the Cavs make their life so much more difficult because, as me and Joey have talked about multiple times, we don't shoot the free throw well. It's mind-boggling to me. We have good free throw shooters on the team. Lauri Markkanen for a big can shoot free throws. Jared Allen for a big can shoot free throws. Kevin Love for a big can shoot free throws. Okoro's pretty good at the line. Garland, Cedi Osman, all these guys are capable. They just got to knock them down. And, the other thing, Josh, that I want to address is, we're talking about the defensive end and the Cavs are going to grind out these games without Garland. Well, man, when you do not add your guards, and we talk about the limited guard play and scoring offensively, your bigs, Lauri Markkanen, Evan Mobley, Kevin Love, Jared Allen, they have to be more aggressive on the board. We cannot be even or losing the rebound battle with Minnesota, with Washington, with Detroit, with these teams. When we have 3 7-footers on the court, we should be getting multiple second chance possessions. And that's what really bothered me. Obviously, Lauri Markkanen came back off his sprained ankle after the All-Star break. He looked good shooting from outside. I would argue he's the reason why we won that game against Washington. He scored over 20 points, hit over 6 threes. He's going to be valuable to me down the stretch. I know you don't really feel that way, though.
No, I don't. Because here's my problem with Lowry. And I don't disagree with your analysis about specifically that game against Washington. So I think you and I are in agreement on that one. But overall, what I see from Lowry is, like, if we're constantly going to Jared Allen or Evan Mobley, or if Garland is getting a pick and roll and kicking it out to Okaro, for example, and if Lowry's not engaged, it feels like he just kind of stands there and mopes and all that. And I'm like, dude.
See, but his job is to be the wing on the 3-point line, because teams have not yet figured out how to defend these 3 7-footers when Darius Garland is on the court. Last night, I could argue we were just missing shots. We weren't playing well on the defensive end. The offensive end was not the problem. We still were able to score with Garland in the lineup. When Garland's not in the lineup, they had to use Markkanen. Markkanen was guarded a lot by Cardwell Pope, and so was Kevin Love, and they just could not take advantage. But with Markkanen, who's a 3-point shooter who can spread the floor, he's been very good defensively, I would say, too. He gets out, he runs the floor as well, and it's hard to match up because your regular small forward is 6'9", 6'10". If you put a power forward on him or whatever, well, then Mobley is going to have the mismatch. If you put your center on him, then Jared Allen is going to have the mismatch. So either way, the Cavs have the height advantage. It's not a Markkanen issue. It's not a Mobley issue. It's not an Allen issue. It's not a Love issue. They're getting the chances. They just have to convert and use their eye to their advantage.
See, I get what you're saying, but how do I say this? I didn't like the idea of doing the 3 bigs in the starting lineup from the very beginning, if I'm going to be honest with you. Because for me.
But what have you seen? I mean, the Cavs have shocked us all this year. Listen, we've talked about this so many times. Nobody expected this team. I know my coach, Joey Schneider, expected them to at least make the play-in tournament, at least be a 500 team. Nobody expected this team to be 10, 11 games above 500 at this point in the season. So when you're saying, look, listen, the lineup hasn't worked and all this, well, yes, it has worked. It just hasn't worked recently over the last couple of weeks. But in the early February, we were 2.5 games back to the number 1 seed of the conference.
Yeah, I know, but I think at that point we were overachieving.
But how can you say we were overachieving when every single night until the last couple of weeks we were putting body bags on people? We were dominating people by 20 points a night.
Because here's the thing: teams like Milwaukee, Miami, and some of these teams that we know are going to be there, they don't look at the regular season the same way we do, where it's like Milwaukee knows that, okay, like October through like December doesn't mean that much. We know we're going to be there. Miami's the same way. They don't care because they know they're going to be there. Brooklyn thought that's how it was going to be. Obviously, it hasn't played out like that. Philadelphia, look at the Western Conference. Golden State had a feeling they would be there be where they are by this point. Phoenix thought they would be where they are by this point. So I agree. Nobody expected the Cavs to be where they are, but I think that's also because teams weren't putting their foot down all the way on the gas pedal.
I agree with you, but now that they are, the Cavs have to make that adjustment because at this point, the Cavs are where they are. But here's the thing. The Cavs are right now, they are 4.5 games back of the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference. They are 2.5 games back on the number 7 seed. I thought that I wasn't even thinking about it a couple of weeks ago. It just goes to show you that for a team like the Cavs, who, listen, you could argue, are they championship contenders? Are they playoff contenders? There's certainly a difference in that. The way we played over the last week, no, we're not. But I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, last week we were championship contenders, and this week we're not even going to make the playoffs. Like, that just, like, no, like, this team is still good. We've seen it with our own eyes. They have read the tea leaves, and maybe last night's bad loss to Charlotte wakes them up, and maybe they come out against Philly on Friday, and who knows, maybe we smack Philly in Philadelphia. Maybe we get blown up by 20. Maybe it's a close game. I don't know how it's going to go, but I just know that this team is exciting. They are legitimate, and they are a playoff team at this point, and they have to start playing like it, and expectations can change throughout the season.
Bingo!
Listen, they can change throughout the season. I was saying before the year, I thought they were going to be a 13th seed. I thought they were going to be in the lottery again. Not the case. They're going to be a playoff team. And for me, for this season to be a success, when they were 2.5 games out of first place a week ago, they have to at least win one playoff series. You can't say they lose a playoff series. Now, this season would have been a failure because of the hot start we got off to.
See, okay, we're going to have to I cannot agree with you on that one because, again, before the season, you just said it yourself that before the season, you had this team projected as a 13 seed. You had us in the lottery. I predicted us to win 30 games. That probably would have put us maybe in the play-in tournament, maybe just outside of the play-in tournament. But I did not have us making the playoffs. So for me, making the playoffs qualifies this as a successful season.
But they're going to be 47, 48 wins. It's like, okay, this is my example. Phoenix. Did anybody think Phoenix last year was going to make the NBA Finals when the season first started? No, but they were the number 2 seed going into the postseason. Their expectations were at least Western Conference Finals, if not the NBA Finals, especially when the number 1 seed got knocked out. Their expectations were the NBA Finals, depending on what seed this team finishes, because there's going to be a lot of back and forth with Miami, Chicago, Philly. Brooklyn could be in the play-in tournament. They may even move up. Boston's starting to get hot. Toronto. Like, I think this team could finish as a number 4 seed. And if you have home court in a playoff series, you must win at least one playoff series.
Home court doesn't guarantee you're going to win. So I'm looking at the standings right now on ESPN. The standings are as follows. You got Miami number 1, Chicago's number 2. They're 1.5 games back. Philadelphia's number 3. They're 2 games back. Milwaukee is number 4. They're 3 games back. We are number 5 at 4.5 back.
So exactly. So we're only 2.5 back of the number 3 seed. If you're a number 3 seed in the conference, come on, Josh, you got to at least make the second round, don't you?
Yeah.
So exactly my point. So let's say this team does get a 3 or a 4 seed. It depends on what seed. We could be in the damn play-in tournament. I can't believe I'm saying that right now, but we absolutely could be. We could also be legitimately a 3, a 2, or a 1 seed.
Okay, that's fine. But again, you said it yourself. You had this team as a number 13 seed before the season started. Am I wrong?
You're not wrong.
Exactly. So, wouldn't you qualify a successful season then as making the damn playoffs?
No, because the expectations have changed throughout the season. One of the expectations, which I'll switch to now on the court, is Kevin Love. Because listen, as I've been saying on this podcast now for 19 episodes that I've been doing this, man, I can't believe how well Kevin Love has played coming off the bench, being the 6th-man front runner of the year in my and Joey Snyder's opinion. It's just absolutely amazing because I was advocating trading for him for the last 3 years. It seems like to me, though, Josh, Kevin Love and Cedi Osman, a little bit more Love, but you could throw in Osman there, are the igniters that this team needs. They need to come in off the bench early, and they need to score. When Kevin Love is on early, this team can bury people. When he's not on early or when he's struggling, and Cedi Osman to a point again, when they struggle early, the team struggles. And then when they struggle early, they have to claw back in the ball games.
That's true. And I was not sure how Kevin Love was going to fit in with this team, especially when I heard he was going to come off the bench in favor of Evan Mobley starting. I actually thought the starting lineup was going to be Garland, Sexton at the shooting guard, because I like that. And then who did I had Cedi at the small forward, I think. Either I had Cedi or Okaro. Then I had Kevin Love, and then I had Jared Allen, because I know Evan Mobley was the number 3 overall pick, but I didn't think we were going to put him in the starting lineup right away. I thought we were going to kind of ease him into things by bringing him off the bench and then increasing his minutes, and then eventually put him in the starting lineup because we were going to trade Kevin Love. Obviously, that has not been the case. And you're right, Kevin has done a great job as the 6th man. Here's my problem, though. Yeah, we have Kevin Love coming off the bench, but the problem is, who else is going to come in off the bench to relieve the starters when we need to pick up those minutes? Because
me and Joey have talked about this a lot, Josh. The Cavs don't have a starting unit and a bench unit. They basically have just a rotation. Guys will be mixing in with the starters. So you have Kevin Love that comes in, you have Cedi Osman that comes in. Those are your 2 main scorers. Now, when Rondo gets back, Rondo will be part of that unit that comes in. It will be interesting to see whether it's LeVert or Okaro. We've been debating back and forth here in the All Things Cavs podcast who starts at the 2. You could certainly make an argument for both, but I think
would start LeVert. Personally.
I tend to lean and agree with you there. So, if you put Okaro on the bench, I think those are your guys. But we talked about Okaro being defensive minded. Rondo, will do his thing. He'll get a couple points. He'll get a couple assists. He'll get a couple rebounds. He'll be that veteran leadership. Kevin Love and Cedi Osman, though, as I said, when these guys are hot, when they are shooting good 3-point, because mostly that's what they're doing, right? They're shooting the 3. When they're making their shots, this team just goes. Garland gets into it. Markkanen gets into it. J.A. gets his. Mobley gets his. When they struggle, it's like the defense then, it's like they're deflated back on the defensive end and they can't get back. And so when they're missing shots, the whole rhythm is off. I've noticed it more over this past week where it's like Kevin hits a couple threes early, boom, we're good. If not, it's like, we're down by 10, we're down by 12, and we're down by 15, and we're down by 20. These slow starts have been killing us.
Oh, I know. I mean, go back and right before the All-Star break, you look at that game against Indiana, the day before our first matchup with Philadelphia. I don't know how we were able to come back and win that game against the Pacers in that road game right before the All-Star break, where I wasn't able to watch the game because I was at the Akron Zips game against Kent State, but I was following the game on my phone, and I'm like, what the hell? We're down by 20? Are you kidding me? Like, you can't do that against teams you're supposed to be, quote unquote, superior than. Like, we're supposed to be superior to Indiana. We're supposed to be superior to Detroit. We're supposed to be superior to Orlando. Those types of teams. And yet, like, if you go back and look at the game against the New York Knicks, we barely won that game. It was like 95-92, for example. Like, that's my biggest thing with the Cavaliers lately. And actually, it's not even just lately. It's been a bit of a problem for a large majority of the season where, like, they get off to these slow starts and they find themselves trailing by double digits, 12, 14, 20 plus points. And you're like, great, now you have to dig yourself out of a hole against a team you should not be trailing by. You should not be losing like this against. It's extremely frustrating. So I share your sentiment on that. And I don't know if, like, we need to make a change in the starting lineup. Like, maybe we bring Lowry off the bench. Let me just put this idea out there for a sec, okay? Let's say LeVert gets back to being fully healthy and he's good to go, right? What do you think of this starting lineup? You take Lamar Stevens out, you put him on the bench, maybe you bring him in with Cedi Love, I don't know. But you go with this starting lineup. You have Garland at the point guard, so you keep that. You have Okaro at the shooting guard, so that stays the same. But instead of Lowry, you put Caris LeVert in there at the small forward, and then you keep Mobley and Jared Allen. I think, in my opinion, that's the way we should do things. Because, again, I personally don't like Lowry in the starting lineup.
You're dying to get him out of there.
But I have nothing against Lamar Markkanen. I'm not like a Lamar Markkanen hater or anything like that, because he's shown flashes of good ball play, but it's just, for me, he's too inconsistent. Whereas when I see like Cedi Osman out there with Garland and Love and Jared Allen, for example, if we go with that unit, everybody seems to be scoring somewhat on a consistent basis. And the offense, like I said, is moving. Guys are cutting. Guys are posting up and like saying, hey, give me the ball. Give me the ball. I'm open. With the I guess this is similar to Sexton, is sometimes I feel like the offense gets stuck in the mud when Lowry is out there. And I don't know why. Because, again, I like Lowry. It makes sense why he's in the starting lineup. But for some reason, the way I see it, it's just not fitting right now.
I don't have a problem with the starting lineup. I have a problem with the end of the game lineup. Specifically, I want to go to the lineup against Detroit. Okay, I know Brandon Goodwin is the starting point guard. And me and Joey have talked about this multiple times where, they had Cedi Osman starting in a point guard. Obviously, we don't understand why they did that. We're not understanding why Dean Wade has been in the lineup. Dean Wade is the worst minutes on the team. One night he played 30 or 35 minutes. The next night, like last night, he doesn't even play in the first half. I don't understand it. I also don't understand why you have an undrafted player in Brandon Gilbert. Listen, he's a good backup point guard in the NBA. He's good for an undrafted player. Why is he on the court taking the biggest shot to tie the game? It didn't make any sense to me. I don't understand it. I think at that point, you do have to put Cedi Osman on the floor. You put Markkanen on the floor. You put Love on the floor. Maybe even put Mobley now. Maybe you put 4 bigs on the floor because that's what this team is really built as. When you are handicapped at the guard position, and nothing against Goodwin, because Goodwin played great Monday night against Minnesota. He puts up 16 points or however many points he puts up. But against Washington, he can't make a bucket if he tried. So it just, to me, it's really frustrating. It's like me and Joey talked about this coming out of the break. It was like, okay, the rotation's getting a little bit weird now. Let's figure this out. When we come back from the break, everybody's going to know their role. Because some nights it feels like some guys play a lot, and some nights they don't play any. And it just feels like they haven't figured it out yet.
Yeah, but I actually have a player who's I think has even stranger minutes than Dean Wade, and that's Lamar Stevens. Because when he's on the court, I see him as the second version of Isaac Okaro. But here's the thing with Lamar. I actually think he has a better offensive game than Isaac Okaro, because I agree with you. Okaro is a very defensive-minded player. He needs to work on that offense because for me, his offensive game is not up to par to where it should be to qualify him as a shooting guard. Note that word, shooting guard. You need to be able to shoot and make baskets. I don't see that enough from Okaro. Whereas when I look at Lamar Stevens, I see someone who I wouldn't say he's a full two-way player, but he's closer to being a two-way player, I should say.
I don't know. I think I think they're kind of football. I think Stevens a little bit better offensively than Okaro, but I think Okaro has the edge on the defensive end. Exactly. And this Cavs team is built on defense. And like we talked about earlier in the podcast, before the break, this team was #1 in the league in defense. And since the All-Star break, and really a little bit before, starting with the game against Philadelphia, they have not played good defense. They got to get back to playing good defense. They did it against Washington, and that's won them the game that Saturday night. Well, Josh, we got to transition now here to the final segment on today's podcast. It is previewing the next 3 games in Cavaliers basketball. We have Friday night in the Wells Fargo Center in Philadelphia, a big matchup with the 76ers. We're going to see James Harden for the first time against the Cavs in a Sixers uniform. Sunday, on the day of Joey Snyder's birthday. Happy early birthday to our friend and coach, Joey Snyder. The Cavaliers will have their first prime-time game of the season. ESPN, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time against the Toronto Raptors, a very good team that's playing well. And then Tuesday, they turn around to what feels like our house of horrors lately. We play Indiana again in Indiana. Josh, your expectations for these next 3 games for the Wine and Golders?
So I want to finish off that road trip that you were just mentioning. After Indiana, we have a very tough back-to-back. I believe it's Miami first and then Chicago, if I remember correctly. So not an easy week of games coming up. But the game I want to talk about is actually not the Philadelphia game. It's the game against Toronto. Because the Cavs and Raptors, I'll pull up the standings again. The Raptors are number 7 right now at 34-27. They're only 6 games back of the number 1 seed. The Cavs are number 5. They're 36-26 and 4.5 games back. So Cleveland and Toronto are pretty much like this when it comes to the standings. Like they could flip-flop on any given day. We've won the first 2 games against the Raptors of the season. So we need to win that game. Obviously, we also need to win that Philadelphia game because I think that's the most important season series is against the 76ers because I could see that possibly being a playoff matchup. But for me, the bigger game is still Toronto because A, it's our first nationally televised game and it's on freaking ESPN. B, it's, again, we're practically tied with the Raptors in the standings. So you need to win that game to stay clear of the play-in tournament because I'll just say it right now. Given our injury situation and all that, I don't think we're beating Philadelphia. Not in Philadelphia, not with James Harden playing the way he is, and not the way Joel Embiid is. I don't want to say we don't stand a chance because I believe we only lost by 10 against the 76ers the last time. So I think we'll keep it.
Embiid had a 40-point triple-double in that game.
There you go. I just think even though Jared Allen, I think can match up with Joel Embiid.
Got to be more aggressive, as I talked about early in the show. Him and Mobley and these big guys. You cannot let these guys. We have the height advantage, right, Josh? Like you got to be more aggressive on the boards. To your point, I think that they will finish 2-1. I believe that they will drop that game against Philadelphia. I'm hoping I'm wrong. I think they do bounce back against Toronto and the Pacers, and they got to get here on a 1-1 winning streak because, as you mentioned, me and Joey will talk about it next week. That back-to-back, it's a huge week next weekend for our Cleveland Cavaliers. Well, Josh, I appreciate you for joining us today on the All Things Cleveland Cavaliers podcast. Before I let you go, I want to remind everybody of our amazing sponsorship opportunity here with Believe Land Media. Again, we have many Believe Land Media podcasts, not just the All Things Cavaliers podcast, but Den of the Dogs covering the Cleveland Browns, the Guardians of the CLE podcast covering the Guardians, the Future Guardians of the Land, which covers Guardians, prospects, and affiliate teams, the Mic Drop podcast, which covers general sports, as well as Believe in Media is just now starting a professional wrestling podcast called the Pile Driver Podcast. We are looking for sponsorships to sponsor these amazing podcasts and our written content. We are growing every single month, and we hope that you can grow with us as well. As a reminder, our sponsorship packages range from anywhere from $50 to $200 a month, and you can contact our owner/operator, Kevin Slides at BelieveLandMedia LLC.com for more sponsorship opportunities. Josh, you got the last word for today.
I appreciate you having me on, Brandon. Joey, sorry you couldn't be here. Definitely would love to talk with the two of you because Brandon, I think you and I had great chemistry. I definitely want to continue this.
So much for being on the podcast today. As always, we will be back next week with another episode of All Things Cavs. Let's hope we get some victories. And until next time, what up, no?